got the Browns and the Bengals going at it in a pretty interesting AFC North divisional battle this weekend. Who do you think is going to get the dub and why?
Two words: Joseph Burrow. One quarterback's been to a Super Bowl. One quarterback is playing incredibly well, and the other one's just coming back from basically a 2-year suspension. I mean, Deshaun struggled against one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the NFL last week. Had a bad interception, missed opportunities, drop pass. I mean, you name it. Cleveland did not look good last week on the offensive side. Now, I will say they looked great on the defensive side, but that is a skewed metric because they played again the Texans. So the Bengals offense has been playing well. Their offensive line has been playing a lot better. Joe Mixon is slated to hopefully come back from this game. He's listed as questionable, but again, he's hopefully going to be cleared from the concussion protocol the rest of this week or hopefully before the game, and they'll be at full strength. The Bengals on the defensive side look good. Offensively, they look great. And I think that they're, like I said last week, surging at the right time. The confidence is boosting from the offensive side. Obviously, Jamar Chase is back. T. Higgins is getting confident. The only negative is Hayden Hurst is doubtful with an injury. So at the tight end position, I don't know how that's going to be, relied upon with that being Joe's safety blanket over the middle of the field on third down. But again, I'm sure the Bengals will have some different options. I'm sure the Bengals will have an offensive option ready for for Joseph as they prepare for a division rival in Cleveland. Now, I will say again, with Cleveland hesitating, or should I say struggling with Deshaun within the first week, I think they lean on Nick Chubb just a little bit more. You got to give him more touches. You got to give him and Kareem Hunt the ball as much as you can. And of course, you're going to have to feed your best target in Amari Cooper. Now, I know that David Njoku is listed as questionable with an injury as well, so we will see how that goes. But obviously, with Cooper and Njoku, Peoples Jones, Deshaun Watson has targets to throw to. It's just a matter of if he can hit them and if he can effectively produce in this system. So I got the Bengals in about a 7 to 10 point window just because I believe that the Bengals are just a flat out better team. But again, with that Browns defense catching a little bit of steam last week, who's to say that Myles Garrett doesn't have himself a big game? I mean, he is obviously one of the best defensive tackles in the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if he comes away with this with a sack and a half. And, the Bengals offensive line easily can take a week off. We talked about it last week also. We hope that the confidence that they've had over the last couple of weeks doesn't get to their head and say, you know what, we're one of the best teams in the AFC. We're going to be fine. Joe's going to be fine. You can't sleep on Myles Garrett. That man is, I don't even know if that is a man, but regardless, they have a decent challenge in front of them again because the last time they played, even though it was against Jacoby Brissett, the Bengals got embarrassed 32-13. So the Browns know the Bengals relatively well, and I'm sure the Bengals want revenge for that last game. So again, I say that the Bengals win, not necessarily in a close one, but it's going to be a little bit closer than people would assume. As I said, similarly to the last game, I got this one, like I said, maybe I don't know, 28-21, 24-17, and if this gets crazy, maybe even 24-14, something like that. I think that the Bengals, obviously, like I said, come out on top and they move on to 9-4.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are going to get their revenge, very similar to what we just talked about with the Bills getting their revenge potentially against the Jets this weekend. I do believe that you're in the ballpark of where I was going to go with. I do think this is going to be a competitive game as far as I see it, just because I got to give credit where credit is due with the Browns. That Browns defense the last couple weeks has been very solid. They gave Tampa fits 2 weeks ago. And I think they held Tampa to 17 points in that game. I know Tampa's had their issues this year, but nonetheless, to hold them to 17 points, that's a pretty solid performance as far as I see it. And look, I mean, going up against the Texans, it's not really the toughest competition, but you still held them to 14 points while going on the road. So, and that was despite the fact that that was Deshaun Watson's first game as a member of the Browns, his first game in over 2 years. So, all things considered, this defense is pretty solid. And I do believe that even though that I had the Bengals winning this game, this Browns defense can make it very difficult for Joe Burrow, but not enough for the Bengals to lose this game as far as I see it. When I look at the Bengals specifically, the Bengals I think are just running and gunning right now. And with them getting that really tight win against the Chiefs last week, it really shows to me how this team has come full circle from where they were at the beginning of the year when their offensive line couldn't protect anybody. They were turning the ball over, and by and large, just the offense was stagnant. But now we're just in the first week of December, and the Bengals look like one of the best teams in the AFC, and they kind of have that momentum building in their favor of potentially going to another Super Bowl if Joe Burrow can play up to snuff and the defense can come up with some big plays to stop opposing offenses. And it does seem like they're on that track right now. But this is one of those games where they're going up against a division rival in the Browns. And the Browns, based on what Kevin had just outlined, based off of their first matchup this year, the Browns smacked them up. When it comes to the Browns, the one thing that they're going to have to bank on is being able to run the ball effectively against this Bengals defense. And that could be tricky. Now, granted, you got Nick Chubb back there, who's one of the best running backs in the game, and he's been shown to really run the ball effectively when given proper touches. It just depends on whether or not that the Browns' offensive line can win those battles on the line of scrimmage consistently to open up some run lanes for him to exploit and potentially rip up some pretty big chunk plays here for the Browns. Because when I look at Deshaun Watson, you could definitely tell he's rusty. I think he's still getting comfortable with the offensive system that the Browns have in place right now. And I think it's going to take a couple weeks for him to get settled in this offense. And honestly, it may take until the offseason and probably a full training camp for him to get really comfortable with this offense. Because, I mean, when you miss the first 10, 11 games due to a suspension and you're coming into the season in the first week of December, I can understand there being rust. And that just kind of comes with the territory when you've been out for so long, not just with the suspension, but without playing for 2 years at this point. So I don't like the matchup here for the Browns going up against the Bengals simply just because the Bengals defense is able to force some turnovers against Deshaun Watson, or if they're just able to stifle this Browns offense, I think that's pretty much all they'll need. Because when you give Joe Burrow the ball, and as long as he's not turning the ball over and he's held upright based on his offensive line protecting him properly, I think that Joe Burrow led offense, I mean, you could tie in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd needs to step up after dropping the easy walk-in touchdown last week. And then we'll see
Pissed
what
me off,
happens.
and I'm not even a Bengals fan.
We'll see what happens with Joe Mixon. I know he's still in concussion protocol. We don't know if he's going to play in this game or not. But if he does, man, the Bengals are going to have a lot of offensive weapons to work with here. And I think it's going to be too much for the Browns to handle. It is a divisional game, so these games tend to be closer in nature compared to just outright blowouts. So I will say the Bengals win this one. I'm going to say this is going to be like a 7 to 10 point victory for the Bengals here. I don't think this is going to be a runaway game like the first one was when the Browns just smacked up the Bengals. But overall, I think the Bengals win this one relatively comfortably based on the fact that it is a divisional game. I'm going to say the Bengals win this one by the score of, let's say, 27 to 17. I think this could be a fair score for this game the way that I see it. But just to kind of round this whole segment out, I think the Bengals are rounding in the form at the perfect time. I think they're gearing up for a deep playoff run. And I think it's games like this where they could look back before the playoffs start as just we hit a groove, we got the momentum on our back right now, and it's just run and gun until the playoffs. I think they're in that position right now. So I got the Bengals winning this one 27 to 17. That's my final score.